Have you ever wondered what it's like to sit in on a magazine editorial meeting? Well, this is your chance. You're listening to Salt Lake Speaks, a monthly podcast where our editors, writers, and staff dig deeper into stories, chat with newsmakers, and talk amongst ourselves about arts, culture, food, music, politics, or whatever else might strike our fancy. After all, we are Utah's biggest fans.
Hi, this is Mary Brown Maloof, executive editor of Salt Lake Magazine, and you're listening to Salt Lake Speaks, Salt Lake Magazine's own podcast. Today we have with us Andrew Clyburn. He's the general manager of Current, the seafood restaurant that has made waves, in the city the last few years. And Andrew's here to talk about something that used to happen all the time at this time of year. You'd hear this, you'd see it in every press release, you'd see it, all the restaurants had banners and it would say, Le Beaujolais est arrivé, right? And it was Nouveau Beaujolais. So that got a little bit hackneyed. It got a little over-marketed, as things can do. Thank you, Georges Duboeuf. And so without, although Beaujolais still, it's really good wine, it can be really, really good wine. It was just over-marketed and oversold and misunderstood the way things are when they're oversold. But Andrew has a new idea he's doing at Current, and it's American Nouveau. New. So New World New World Nouveau. Lots of plays on that. And I guess the first thing I really want to understand is, what do you mean by that? Because it's not Beaujolais. And Beaujolais is traditionally a wine that was made at the end of the harvest in France. And it was bottled fresh. It was not aged at all. So that meant that you had to drink it really quickly, which nobody ever had a problem doing. Great, quaffable, light wine, not one of your big, serious wines. So that being what Beaujolais Nouveau originally was, what's your take on it, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I think we should talk about the fact that there are really two worlds of Beaujolais, right?
Yes.
So when you go to the wine store here in town, there's lots of wonderful Beaujolais on the shelf that is wonderful and meant to be drunk at multiple times down the road, right? And then there's this Beaujolais Nouveau thing, which the French used to call vin de l'année or something like that, where it was a way for the winemakers and their families to drink that harvest, to celebrate the harvest, harvest wine, right? So, and like you said, that sort of became like this big marketing party, and some of us anyway, have been to those parties, and they're kind of fun, but the wines themselves aren't very good, in my opinion.
Right.
And the whole sort of the hoopla around it got tired. So.
That's a good point, though, and I didn't say that. There's Beaujolais and there's Beaujolais Nouveau.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so keep that in mind when you go to the liquor store.
Right.
That they're two very different products.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea came up between me and Brett Ludeman, who's a local wine broker here. He owns Flora and Fauna Wines. And we thought, why don't we approach some wineries and see if they'd be willing to ship us here in Utah some Nouveau wines. Some wines from this vintage, 2017, that they ferment, bottle, and get to us within a couple weeks. And sort of turn the whole tradition on its head because A, they're coming from the US.
Right.
B, they're all what are called natural wines, nothing added to them, very little to no sulfur. And they're just meant to be drunk right now, having a party. So kind of keeping the tradition of having a great time in November, third Thursday in November, or in this case,
and a harvest celebration, because these are all this year's vintage.
Absolutely, which is an interesting vintage we can talk about maybe with the wildfires.
Oh yes, with the wildfire, I would be interested to talk about that. And natural wines are the buzzword in wine now. I mean, they are the buzzword.
Yeah.
And so why don't you explain just very succinctly what that means? Because wine's a natural thing, right?
Right.
I mean,
well, first
everybody,
of all,
how many winemakers have I interviewed and said, it's really all about the grape.
Totally.
It all starts in the grape. You just put the grape in the bottle. Not really.
No.
There's a little more to it than that.
There's a little bit more to it, but there's no one definition of natural wine. You talk to 100 different natural winemakers, and they'll give you 100 different definitions. But we can maybe distill it to the fact that the winemaker is doing as little as possible to make great wine. They're not adding yeast. That's probably the one that's the easiest to.
Right.
They're not adding yeast to the wine to ferment the sugar to make alcohol.
Right.
They're just using
They're
the
not
yeast
the
that come
yeast
with the
that's
grapes.
on the grapes, and it's
Totally.
always on the grapes.
Yeah,
That's what
so
they
that's
always
probably
say.
the common denominator.
Right.
But they're certainly not adding things like color or tannin or acid or water or any of the 200 plus things that are allowed in American wine laws to
Right.
make a wine taste like wine. And this, in all these 6 cases here we have on the table, and that you'll be able to try tomorrow.
And
Nothing.
we'll
Yeah.
have pictures of these on our website, saltlakemagazine.com. So take a look so you can see what these bottles look like. They look different in the bottle than most wines.
Yeah,
So-
a lot of them are interesting color, interesting grapes
and
too.
Yes,
you know?
yeah, and some of them are cloudy. They're not necessarily all clear. So I guess they aren't fined, or I mean.
Literally nothing was done to them except to ferment the sugar out and to get them dry,
Right.
and then to put them in a bottle, put a cork in it, and literally rush them in some cases to Utah.
Wow. Okay.
Thank you, DABC. So they're as a clear a window into the vintage as you can possibly get, which was the whole point of Beaujolais Nouveau in the beginning. You know, sharing this vintage with your friends. It's a harvest party, you know?
Right.
I mean,
We're
what happened this
done.
year? Totally, yeah. Here comes Christmas, here comes Thanksgiving, all that. So
Right.
that's what this is really about. It's a celebration of the end of harvest. And it's a clear expression of what actually happened this year.
And a very temporal expression.
Totally, yeah.
Which is the interesting thing.
Yeah.
Because wine, so much of it depends on age, and that. So you taste a wine at the beginning, and you take it out with those thieves out of the barrel, and you taste it, and it's like, well, I think it's got another 5 years to go or something. It'll
Right.
be great then. And which is one intimidating thing about wine, but it's also a fascinating thing about it. But this is the opposite of that.
Yeah,
This is what happened this year.
Yeah.
Starting at bud break and
Right.
stuff. This is what this year was like. This is weather in a bottle.
This is what you
Not
drink
just
while you're going around
climate.
the cellar using the thief to taste
Right.
the real wine. I mean, that's really what this is. It's totally unpretentious. It's what the
Right.
winemakers drink.
Right.
This is for winemakers and for friends and family and people who are interested in wine,
Right.
like we are. But yeah, it is a record of what happened this year.
Right.
You know?
So what areas do these wines come from? You've got 6 bottles here.
Yeah, so 5 of the 6 come from California.
Right.
And then Fos Piste, the winery itself is in Portland, downtown Portland. And Jesse Skiles is the winemaker, and he's doing great things up in the Northwest. But the others come from California, and really all up and down the state.
Okay.
Lo-Fi comes from the Santa Barbara County, Central Coast, all the way up to Scribe, which is a really well-known winery up in Sonoma, which we have their Nouveau, which is really, really cool this year. They don't make very much of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And these wines, the color of them, you'll see when you see them online, at least 3 of them are this sort of cloudy cranberry juice kind of color. They're not a deep, dark red, even though this Scribe you're mentioning, the Pinot Noir,
Yeah.
is Pinot Noir.
Right,
You know,
right.
this is not what we think Pinot Noir looks like unless you're talking about a rosé.
Right.
Right. So, why?
Time. time
On
is
skins?
yeah,
Time on the
exactly.
skins.
So normally it takes a couple weeks, right? Typically, I'm speaking very big generalizations. Takes about 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days, to completely ferment a red wine.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, most of the time it's on its skins, and you're sort of punching
Right.
down,
Punch down the
and
cap.
you're doing all that stuff. Well, in this case, it's just on his skins in some cases for a very little bit of time, and then they are pressing it off like a rosé, and then finishing the fermentation. And that's because there's not a whole lot of time to get that color and those tannins and all that flavor for their regular wines into the bottle. So
Right.
this is really it's about a truncated amount of time. It's about freshness and really getting this out to the market as quick as
Right,
possible.
as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Well, back to the weather in California, which
Yeah.
was a very interesting year. Wildfires and just kind of a mess out there. I
Right.
used to live in Sonoma.
Oh, cool.
And I just watched those fires getting closer and closer to places that I knew and loved, and in some case hitting them and other places being spared and so
Yeah.
forth. So how would that, do you say, what kind of effect did this particular year, and not just the fires, but the whole year of weather, have on this year's wine? What are we going to taste that's unique?
Yeah, so starting with the big picture, California's been in a drought for
Right.
a long time, decades-long drought, and then they had a gigantic amount of precipitation last winter.
Right.
Mammoth, the snow going up to the ski lift sometimes, and then it got dry again this summer, and everything was going along pretty well. I mean, we're used
Right.
to drought at this point in those
Sure.
in the growing regions, and then in early October, actually. Landed in Oakland on the day that the fires broke out. It was a Monday morning. Actually, it was previous night, Sunday night, but
Right.
Monday morning, and it was like watching. I mean, it was apocalyptic.
Yes.
It was really, really crazy, and ended up cutting that trip short and coming back home. Will you taste that in the bottle? No. Will you taste the emotion? I argue, yes, you will. I mean, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of, these wineries typically aren't well funded. They're a little bit smaller,
Right.
And they don't own their vineyards, and so they're really at the mercy.
Oh, okay, so they're not estate while they're buying their grapes.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
In most
most
cases, yeah. It's not 100% rule with these 6, but mostly.
Right.
So you're really tasting. We talk about the record of the vine and the year. Well, also the hands that made it.
Oh, sure.
And the hope of next year and the hope of the year after that. So it's a great way to experience this vintage and kind of remember what the heck happened.
Right. And wine is bottled memories, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a great way to put it.
That's one of the
In
wonderful.
some cases, you can't remember after you know.
That's the point. Yeah, bottle memories to forget.
Right.
Right. What kind of grapes typically are
Yeah,
these?
so
I've seen this Pinot Noir primarily, but I can't read the other ones.
Scribe is the Pinot Noir that you were pointing to, and then you get into some kind of fun ones. So Martha Stuman is a winemaker and the name of the winery as well that we've worked with a lot at Current this year, and she did a lot of her training in southern Italy, her apprenticeships. And so she's using a grape called Nero d'Avola for hers, 100% Nero d'Avola, which is a Sicilian grape. And then
where is she growing it? I mean, or where is she getting it?
Mendocino.
She's getting Mendocino.
Yeah, Mendocino County is kind of one of the epicenters for this natural American wine movement.
Yes, it follows on it being the epicenter of the organic
Absolutely,
wine
yeah.
movement. It was really the leader of that in California.
Right, and in fact, our own, Evan Lewandowski here in
Yes.
Salt Lake gets almost all of his wine grapes from Mendocino. Yeah, it's too bad we don't have his Nouveau this year. He's out of town. But anyway, the next one.
Evan, we're thinking about you.
I think he's in New York. And then the next one is Brock, which is a really great winery that we visited. It's in Berkeley, right next to Donkey and Goat. And these grapes are fun. It's Valdiguet and Chenin Blanc. One red, one white, equal parts. And that's why it looks like that, which is basically cranberry juice.
Yes.
And it also tastes like kind of a nice cranberry juice, that you want to have a lot of. But Valdiguet...
If you want to forget,
right.
Back to that.
Valdiguet is it's a cool California grape that was actually genetically proven to be from southern France, but they thought it was Gamay because it kind of tastes like Gamay, which is Beaujolais Nouveau, of course. And then Chenin Blanc, which gives it kind of an acid backbone. It kind of gives it that nice zippy feel.
Right.
Yeah. So unusual grapes. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
really unusual,
what
and I
call
read in a
heirloom
white
grapes.
wine bottle. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Not the whole Cabernet.
No.
Not that these grapes can't make great Nouveau, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay,
Sure.
these things, but a winery wouldn't necessarily use those to make this wine because they want to make a little bit of money off of those. It's
Well,
an
that's
economic
the thing,
question.
economic thing.
Yeah.
You've got to use the grapes for, some of it's for fun and a lot of it's for money.
Absolutely.
So that you can have fun.
It's a business, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then another Pinot Noir here from Poe, which is out of Napa. And this Fausse Piste is Grenache, actually. Oregon Grenache, which is, Grenache lends itself really, really well to this process.
I would think.
Yeah,
it would.
it's a fairly light-skinned red grape that called Garnacha in Spain,
Right.
Grenache in France, and makes really, really cool sight-expressive wines, so-called quote-unquote serious wines, but also makes lovely, light, refreshing wines like this from Fos Piste. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, what kind of food are you going to pair with this kind of wine?
Yeah, great question.
All natural, all organic, raw?
Free
Raw
range,
and
raw,
raw.
yes. Has never seen a kid. No, just kidding. The idea here was harvest and seafood. What the heck are we going to do here? So, Alan Bryan's great chef, worked with him now for about a year at Current. And I kind of came up with a menu using cheese and charcuterie, but also lots of fun seafood things too that may be unexpected. Utilizing smoke and acid and a way to sort of shape some of those raw seafood materials into flavors that are going to love these
This
Nouveau
wine.
wines. Yeah,
Right,
which
that's
are
what I
generally
wondered.
light and sort of red fruited.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That is what I wondered when I think of Current as being a seafood restaurant, how you would make the seafood go with this particular kind of wine,
Yeah.
which you wouldn't expect
Yeah.
necessarily. You think something maybe more steely, more, flinty, classic seafood whites.
Right.
So that's interesting. I
Yeah.
can see smoke would definitely do that.
Yeah,
Grilling, some things like that, some caramelization and things like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Those fatty sort of orange flavors, umber
Right.
flavors, that go so well with this kind of wine.
Right.
We've done this in the past too. So, yeah.
Now, these wines are not available at your DABC store. They're all special order. Andrew ordered them specially for this event at Current, but you can taste them. You can taste them. Go to Current's website. It's currentfishandoyster.com and get your tickets or sign up for your seat at the tasting event, which is tomorrow.
Tomorrow starting at 6
Tomorrow
p.m.
starting
Yep.
at 6 p.m. And you'll get a chance to taste through these wines and see what you think, how they pair with seafood, and get a good basic introduction to natural wines, American style.
American style.
Nouveau.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This was an episode of Salt Lake Speaks, a podcast of Salt Lake Magazine. You can find it and other podcasts online at saltlakemagazine.com/podcast. Thanks for listening.